welcome to all the attendees here live in Rome and the attendees following us online. Happy to have you here on this workshop, part of the Sustainable Places Conference, where we'll be looking deeper into the topic of building energy performance certificates, EPCs, and their connection with the Smart Readiness Indicator and how these two instruments can potentially reinforce each other. As said, it's a hybrid workshop, so we hope to have live contributions both from people here in the room, and the presenters have already arrived, and people joining us online. The session is split in two parts. We'll be starting with some very interesting presentations to set the scene. Next, we will move to a panel discussion in which we have representatives of 11 European projects, all working on this kind of topics to share experience, best practices, next steps forward, etc. So for sure, it will be a very interesting exchange today. Speakers of today are André Litiu. He was sharing the SRI topic group C during the technical development projects on the SRI, and he's also very involved in the EPCerts project, working at REHVA, and I'm sure André can later further introduce himself. I hope he can connect later on. And we also have Bonnie Brook, also co-sharing topic group C, and working at Smart EN. Bonnie, do you want to say a few words at this moment?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sten. Good morning, everyone. I suppose I can hear some echo, or can I continue? Okay, good. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. In the absence of the chair of the group, I will just start with a few remarks on the work of the SRI Topical Group C, as we call it. So after the study, the formal study finished, we formed this group, and it is a group of volunteers who are very enthusiastic and would like to follow, but also see the SRI evolve in Europe. So I just prepared a few main points that I'll share with you. I'm happy to have the opportunity to do this. So the Smart Readiness Indicator is an element in the renovation wave. And it is a useful instrument in the transition to smart building stock in Europe. In this respect, we in Topical Group C believe that the SRI has an important role to play in turning our European buildings into healthy, efficient, and smart places. Because the green and digital transition requires smart data, which will come from smart technologies in buildings. So in many buildings, with the introduction of the revised EPBD from 2018, smart services and more smart services that currently available will be introduced in buildings. And one of the recommendations of the group was to consider mandatory requirements for smart readiness assessment for buildings that comply with the EPBD revision from 2018 that calls for introduction and uptake of smart technologies in buildings, as well as for the newly built nearly zero energy buildings above certain size or for certain building types. We also consider that moving to performance-based, data-driven smart readiness indicator would be an important step. And once we move from the smart services catalog assessment towards more data-driven smart readiness indicator, we need to take a few small steps, of course. So that would be, the first step could be just having one indicator for one of the key functionalities, smart functionalities in buildings. It is important that we have a centrally developed European methodology which defines the required performance metrics and automated data transfer in the future. But this is on its own a very big topic in Europe right now about the data management, the data exchange. So I suppose the SRI in the future will also be affected by the legislation that's in consideration, under consideration right now. So another important point that we considered in the group was the possibility to combine the SRI assessment with other building audits, inspections, assessments, in order, of course, to be more efficient and effective in improving the built environment. That would reduce, of course, the effort as well and streamline the assessment in buildings. So for the SRI evolution process, it would be very useful to leverage to the maximum extent the national SRI testing and ongoing Horizon 2020 projects. And I believe this would be the topic for today's session. It is key to ensure consistencies between the assessment and the SRI scores at European level. And it would be really good to use synergies and accelerate collaboration through the SRI platform. We are very happy in the group that this platform has started now, and we are looking forward to an effective collaboration with all of you. So I can't see the screen right now whether do we have Andre with us. This was my welcoming speech, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bonnie, for these interesting words. It seems we still don't have Andre here with us, so I'm afraid we'll have to continue in the same way. Anyway, the points you raised as an introduction were really interesting and right on topic for this session we'll be having today. As a next speaker, we'll have Sylvain Robert providing some viewpoints from European Commission side and CINEA side. Next, we'll have some European projects and EC support services speak. And later on, we'll be looking into the innovations that various European R&I projects are currently looking into. So I'm sure we'll find a lot of touch points with the introduction you just gave. So thanks again, Bonnie, and I will now move forward and introduce our first speaker, which is Sylvain Robert, Thank you for being here with us, Sylvain. Sylvain is working at CINEA and worked previously at the European Commission Services DG Energy, so was highly involved in the development process of the Smart Readiness Indicator. So Sylvain, thank you to be with us. The floor is yours. Please let me know if I shall present from here or if you want to share your own screen.
Thank you, Steen, and it's a pleasure to be here. Well, basically, I understand from Andre that he wanted all the slides to be in the same place. So, I mean, if you are fine, you know, transitioning between the slides when I asked, let's do so. Perfect. So yes, thanks a lot for having me. As Sten has mentioned, it's indeed a file, the Smart Readiness Indicator, on which I've worked. I worked when I was in the commission, and it's a file that is very dear to my heart. Also because it's very close to my technical background and what I did when I was working in research and innovation projects. I just want to clarify that I'm making this presentation on behalf of my colleague Brigitte Jacquemont from DG Energy, who is the policy officer in charge of the Smart Readiness Indicator now in DG Energy. And she could not make herself available today, and for very good reasons, because as Bonnie mentioned, there is some work ongoing on preparing the proposal for evolving the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and our colleagues in DG Energy are very much taken by this. Well, the aim of this presentation will be simply to recap the process that led to establishing the SRI and to outline some short-term perspectives related to its implementation. Next slide, please. So we should just bear in mind that the implementation of the SRI takes place in a context where really the building sector is in the focus. Launched Bonnie already mentioned the renovation wave, which was launched in 2020 in the scope of the European Green Deal. And really this initiative, by its scale, by its ambition, is illustrative of the high policy ambition on clean transition of buildings in the EU. But the SRI, and more broadly the focus on digitalization and smartness of buildings, actually find more their roots in the 2018 revision of the EPBD. Next slide, please. So the text in force when the idea of the Smart Readiness Indicator emerged was the 2010 recast of the EPBD, which included, you know, provisions that you know very well, in particular, minimum energy performance requirements for new buildings and major renovation, energy performance certificates, inspection schemes for HVAC systems, etc. The 2018 revision was part of a broader legislative initiative called the Clean Energy for All Europeans package. And you probably remember the main objectives of this package, which were to ensure an effective application of the energy efficiency first principle, to put the EU on track to lead on renewable energy, and to ensure a fair deal for energy consumers. As regards the EPBD, more specifically, there were two priorities in this revision. The first was to increase the impacts of the directive on renovation of buildings, and the second was to ensure the directive would contribute to the transition to smart and more digitalized buildings. So these priorities were reflected in the provisions set out in the Commission's proposal for amending the EPBD at the time. For renovation, it included, for example, the requirement for member states to establish long-term renovation strategies to decarbonize building stocks by 2050. And for smart buildings, it proposed, in particular, the creation of a new dedicated instrument to rate smart readiness of buildings, the Smart Readiness Indicator. Next slide. When the possible introduction of the SRI was discussed after the Commission adopted its proposal for revising the EPBD, there were many interrogations about the motivation, the purpose, and the relevance of such an instrument. Many at the time were still considering that buildings remain passive systems, basically mortars and bricks, tiles and windows. Also, they did not perceive the connection between energy and smart technologies based on ICT. The motivation for introducing the SRI dwelled from two main considerations. The first one is the recognition of a strong trend towards smarter ICT-intensive buildings, and this is linked to a broader transition of the energy system. The second one, which is supported by evidence from the ground, including from the projects that are funded under the EU programs, is that digitalization of buildings is generally beneficial when it is well designed and well implemented, and it leads to better energy performance, and it leads to better indoor conditions for users. The SRI is aimed at accompanying this trend, promoting smart readiness of buildings by providing an indicator that materializes and quantifies the value added by the smart ready technologies. Ultimately, the objective is to ensure building owners and users are aware of this value and make more informed choices. The approach is quite similar in its spirit to the one that led to establishing energy performance certificates. One important remark is that the SRI, as it was conceived in the proposal for amending the PBD, is not limited in scope to energy performance, but three aspects were identified as being key for smart readiness. One is the ability of buildings to adapt operation mode in response to the needs of the occupant. The second is the ability to optimize energy performance and operation of the building, also contributing to enhanced maintenance. And the third is energy flexibility and ability to adapt operation to signals from the grid. Next slide, please. In line with this initial vision, except that from mandatory, the SRI was proposed as a mandatory instrument in the proposal. The SRI then became optional, voluntary for member states in the amending directive. Well, the 2018 revision introduced in the EPBD provisions the requirement for the Commission to establish a legal framework for rating smart readiness of buildings. One delegated act that establishes the Smart Readiness Indicator scheme and the methodology for calculating smart readiness, and one implementing act that details the scheme's implementation arrangements, which mean basically how the scheme is rolled out. Following the entry into force of the revised DPBD in July 2018, and based on intensive technical work that developed over several years from March 2017, the Commission then developed the SRI legal framework. It adopted the two regulations in October 2020, jointly with the Renovation Wave communication, after also very extensive consultations with the stakeholders and member states representatives. Next slide, please. The first act, so the delegated regulation, is, and this is in line with the PBD, the one that establishes the scheme and the calculation methodology. Usual provisions aside, in such acts, it can be roughly divided into three blocks. The first one is about scoping the SRI scheme. It asks what buildings' capabilities are considered to contribute to smart readiness, and also clarifying how smart readiness is expressed. It introduces the notion of smart readiness classes for buildings, which are defined based on the scores obtained by the building. There is here an obvious analogy with the energy classes. The Act also clarifies the information that has to be included in SRI certificates with a specific annex which lists the items expected. The second block of the Act is really the bulk of it. It describes the methodology for calculating smart readiness of buildings. There is one article and 6 annexes about this. Those clarify the process for calculating smart readiness scores expressed in percentages from an assessment of the building system's capabilities. So we'll have, I guess, more details at some point about this, and I guess you are all of you more or less aware with this methodology, so I'm not going to detail it. And finally, a third block of provisions introduces the base requirements that apply to the scheme. One is the fact that it is optional for member states to endorse it in line with the PBD, but that compliance with the regulations, and this is an important point, is required in the case the scheme is implemented. So this means the two EU regulations are really the regulatory framework that applies when the SRI scheme is implemented anywhere in the member states. And the second is the need to rely on accredited and qualified accredited or qualified experts to issue SRI certificates and to establish a control system to ensure the quality of the scheme. Next slide, please. The implementing regulation is quite short. The same way as for the delegated regulation, it can be divided into three main blocks. One that clarifies the conditions that apply to issue and use of SRI certificates. One key requirement is that SRI certificates can only be issued by qualified or accredited experts. The contents of these certificates have to be in line with the requirements set out in the delegated regulation. Also, the regulation states that self-assessment of smart readiness of buildings, meaning not relying on an expert in order to calculate smart readiness, is possible, but that it cannot lead to a certificate being issued. Then the regulation also includes the requirement for member states about making available information on experts accredited or qualified to the public, and clarifies that the SRI can be coupled with other schemes from the PBD, mainly energy performance schemes, and this is key here today, but also, for instance, to heating and cooling systems inspections under the PBD. The Act also introduces some requirements on member states reporting to the Commission when they implement the SRI. This information can then be used to monitor progress and decide upon any adaptation that could be useful. Finally, the Act clarifies that member states can organize a national testing phase, and this is happening, before deciding whether they implement the SRI, and also the Act clarifies the related arrangements. Next slide. Voilà, the regulations were adopted together with the renovation wave in 2020, and they entered into force in January 2021. If you are curious, you can find the two regulations in the official journal of the Union on the web. And with this entry into force of the regulations, a new phase opened, and we are now in it, to test and implement the scheme in the member states. Next slide, please. To support this process, the Commission has launched a service contract. It covers a broad range of activities. You will have more details with Stein, I assume, but basically it covers ongoing support for testing and implementing the SRI, support for establishment of an SRI platform, technical assistance. One main point also, and this is important, is that it provides flexible ad hoc support to member states that express the need for such support, and the service contract also delivers the necessary material for testing and implementation of the scheme to take place in the best conditions. And in particular, there will be an assessment package to support the assessment of smart readiness and the calculation of the SRI. Next slide. So a few words about the process. The web resources on the Smart Readiness Indicator were made available during the summer. You can find them on the website of DG Energy. So if you type Smart Readiness Indicator, DG Energy, you can go directly to that page. There was a newsletter that was published in August. The SRI assessment package that I've just mentioned has been prepared. It's available on request. First exchanges took place on ad hoc support for member states interested in testing and or implementing the SRI. I assume we'll have more details afterwards. Also, by the end of the year, the Commission also aims to establish and operate a SRI platform, which will consist of a multi-stakeholder forum to support and monitor the implementation of the SRI in the EU. And the platform is intended to contribute to the promotion of the SRI and to sharing the best practices. And it will act as a central information exchange and forward-looking discussion hub for technical, regulatory, and implementation aspects of the SRI. Next slide. And by way of conclusion, I wish to encourage you to consult available information and resources on the website of DGNR. Also, if you have some interest, please note that there is a call for projects under the Life Clean Energy Transition Program, currently opened, under which actions for the SRI can be funded. So the expectation is to fund activities that support and promote the SRI in synergy with the established setup, for instance, the SRI platform. You can refer to the funding portal for this. Voila, that was all. Next slide, just to say thank you very much for listening to me, and voila, very happy to be with you today in this super interesting event.
Thank you very much, Sylvain. I think if I'm well informed, André is back in the meeting. André, can you confirm?
Hello, Stein. Can you hear me?
Yes. So the honor back to you to introduce the next speakers. Great to have you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Stein, and apologies, everybody. It's now my pleasure to finally be able to speak as well, although there have been some presentations already. I just want to say welcome to everybody, and a special thanks to all the guest speakers and panelists. It's now the turn of Alan and Alexis, who will introduce the SmartBuild for EU project, and for let's say our time limitations, I will not say more than that. Alain and Alexis, the floor is yours. Please also introduce yourselves as needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. Hopefully you can hear me sound and clear. Thank you very much to Stein as well. And very good morning to everybody, both to those who are online and to all the people having attended this session this morning. We are going to have a speech, both Alexis and myself, and we will switch from one to the other to make it a little bit more interactive, hopefully. The idea is really about talking about one of the projects that has to be considered also in the context, of course, of the policy framework that have been so nicely introduced by Sylvain Robert in his presentation. And in connection, of course, I would say both with the SRI, but also, of course, with the EPCs. This relates really to some initiative which is set up, I would say, through a project funded by the European Commission under a given grant agreement, which is about trying to improve, I would say, or enhance the awareness about the interest and the need to keep on develop this notion of SRI and EPCs, relying in the future on this context of smart readiness of our future buildings to the construction sector, the big players, the SMEs, and so on and so forth. So we may have to consider a preliminary kind of a context. I do believe that you all know already some of those figures here. In particular, I do believe that some of those figures have not really changed over the last decade. Still, I do believe that the construction sector is improving, but the other industrial sectors are improving as well. So probably the percentage more or less remains the same in terms of energy consumption and GHG emissions. I mean, part of those emissions coming from the construction sector. Of course, it would be okay, I would say, if over the last decade, the emissions from all the industrial sector would have been cut by half, for instance. But this is probably not the case, and in particular, as far as the built environment is concerned, we still have quite an inefficient housing stock. So this is why there was so many over the last decade, and there was, and in particular since 2015, there have been so many initiatives and plans launched by the European Commission. I'm not getting into the detail because they have already been introduced by Sylvain, but in particular in terms of the European Green Deal, the Renovation Wave, and also the new Bauhaus initiative that has been launched by Ursula von der Leyen. And the idea in this context and through the EPBD revision is really to consider that the building should play a different role in the future. From passive buildings to really active buildings in the grids. So that's a key point. And to do that, of course, this is to be implemented in the context of an overall more and more digitalized framework, which will rely on more and more data. And this is where probably the SRIs have a key role to play. So the EPBD promotes, of course, the use of ICT and smart technologies in buildings more and more in the future. And this is where, of course, the Smart Readiness Indicator, from our point of view, is really instrumental, of course, in moving towards our future smart buildings. If we do consider this, then what do we have to do? There have been quite a lot of developments in terms of research and innovation in the last decade, and in particular in the context of the energy efficient buildings public-private partnership signed between the European Commission and the European Construction Technology Platform, the ECTP. And what we need, for instance, more and more is to develop and demonstrate those innovative solutions. For more and more among those solutions, they really improve and try to improve the smartness and the performance of our EU building stock. One of our key challenge now is also that we need to increase our capacity to go to the market and to generate a wide-scale rollout of these solutions. And the SRI, once again, is an interesting opportunity for us because it fixes in some kind of a framework as well to better integrate those innovative solutions and have them indeed really helping us to move toward this notion of smart buildings as we have understood them right now. So there are, in that context, specific target that we need to achieve. And what we try to do is not rocket science, it's not technological development, but we would like to really engage more and more all the stakeholders that are involved in this process. This means, of course, the stakeholders from the construction sector. This means also engaging building occupants. This means sharing more and more information and knowledge, break silos, bridge the gaps between innovation, market, and policy. And I would say support the removing of the last barriers. It will take some time still, but we have to remove those last barriers. And this has to be considered in a very complex smart building ecosystem. I'm not getting into the detail of these ones. You can have a view on that, but it's quite a complex ecosystem from the building components to the buildings itself, which has to be user-centric, to the connected network and to the framework and policy conditions. This is in this context that we decide to have this initiative, which is the SmartBuild for EU initiative. And I let now Alex introduce to this initiative.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me and see me correctly. This is David, working at the ECTPS Project and Policy Officer. I will indeed, in a few minutes, give an introduction to the SmartBuild for EU project, which started actually 1 year ago exactly, gathering the partners that you can see on the screen. The ECTP is coordinating. We are surrounded by Dole Innovation, R2M, URAC, and Vito, and also some other linked third parties, which are actually ECTP members that bring their own expertise and their coverage of Europe in order, well, to bring people around the table, to bring other expertise and so on. So we have ASM in Poland, Cardiff University in the UK, LIST in Luxembourg, TNO in the Netherlands, and VTT in Finland. we have summarized the main objectives and activities of the projects through this slide. Let's say that we have those 4 main activities plus a side one. The first one consists really, as Alain said, to bring people to identify who is working in the field of smart buildings, smart technologies, who are the main stakeholders, and to bring them together in what we have called this big smart buildings innovation community. Map this ecosystem, bring people on the table, exchange with them, and have them exchange among each other. Well, this in order to know what's happening in Europe or in the world, maybe initiate some new collaborations and so on. We also promote what they are doing. Actually, one of the key objectives of this project, Smart Before You, is to promote what is happening. The second activity, well, once we have built this community, is to create those exchanges. We have initiated what we have called task forces. All those task forces identify key notions, key barriers, key obstacles, key topics that have to be tackled and to which we have to bring solutions. So those task forces, I will briefly introduce them later on. A third activity consists in developing and test tools that would come in addition to the SRI and actually support the SRI in defining co-benefits, so additional elements that would come in addition to the SRI in order to show the added value of smart buildings, smart technologies, in order to show what those technologies can bring to the users, to the managers, and so on. So this, yeah, really in addition to what is done in the SRI contract and by other people working on the SRI. Finally, the fourth activity is a summary of what has been done previously in the project, and that is taking all the conclusions, in particular of the task forces, into an SRIA, a roadmap for innovation in the field of smart buildings that will serve to us, to the community, and also maybe to the European Commission in order to frame future calls, for instance, within Horizon Europe. There's also a fifth activity that you see on the bottom right corner of the screen, which is communication. Communication plays a big role in our project. Again, we promote obviously what we do, but we promote what others do through different means. One of those means, just as an example, are those brochures. You see 2 pictures on the screen that show one brochure we have issued earlier this year that highlights, promotes some projects, European projects that are related to smart buildings. It's really, there is a list of 46 or 50 projects, I think, in this brochure. There will be another issue with 100 and 150 projects highlighting nice initiatives in the field of smart buildings. We will do the same also with technologies actually issuing from those European projects. We also organize webinars, again, to promote what others do in Europe. And we participate in workshops, such as today and such as tomorrow and this afternoon. I would like to highlight this afternoon workshop that we're organizing from 3:50 to 5:50 about smart buildings defining R&I priorities. That's very much about the task forces I was mentioning before, and I will say a few words about them right now. If you want to participate in this meeting, you are most welcome to bring your inputs and to brainstorm with us about what are the key topics that we should have to tackle and to discuss. So task forces, quick introduction. We have defined 4 main topics. So interaction with users, efficient building operation, interaction with the external environment, and some cross-cutting issues related to data privacy, security, and so on. Task forces gather groups of, I think, 10 to 20 persons, maybe more actually, maybe more than that. They last for 6 months. First of all, people gather, they identify the key topics, the key issues, and they start brainstorming about it. They propose, and they come up with what are the barriers, what are the drivers, and so on related to those topics. And they issue in the end a white paper, which is reviewed through an open consultation, and that is then consolidated, and that will serve, as I said before, to draw a roadmap. Those are the topics actually covered the last semester. That's topic A, and the topic B are actually just starting now for the next 6 months. So I'm not going to read them all, of course, but those are the kind of topics we discussed during those task forces, the different workshops and meetings we have during those task forces. Again, that will be introduced much deeper this afternoon during the workshop, so you are very much invited to listen to that. those are the main, let's say, the summary of what results from the task forces. You have, for instance, a list of the main barriers identified by the stakeholders that participated, the main drivers, and what are the R&D gaps, what should be investigated further by the community altogether. Now I go back to what was our third activity before, after the task forces. That's really about building on the SRI development and findings in order maybe to go a bit further to address this lack of clarity for maybe some stakeholders or users about the benefits of smart technologies and smart buildings. We have identified some co-benefit indicators associated to smart buildings, related to comfort, for instance, and health, as you can see on this illustration on the right side of the screen. And we will propose in the coming weeks, coming months actually, technology solution packages that could be installed in a certain typology of buildings. And we will show what added values those packages can bring both to the users, both to the building, and so on, in terms of SRI parameters and co-benefits. All this, we will promote it through trainings and workshops in the last year of the project, so actually next year, 2022, different workshops in different places around Europe to promote what we have done and share what we have learned and what people should learn about smart building and smart technologies. This slide to summarize again the last phase of the project, as I said before, that concerns the research and innovation roadmap. We extract everything that has been done before and we propose a roadmap that is shared, common to the people of the smart building innovation community that we have constructed. This should identify the research innovation priorities that should be implemented in Foster across Europe, and we will present it as well with European partners, the European Commission, in order maybe to frame calls for Horizon Europe in particular. The process is rather simple. We bring all the white papers that have been produced during the task forces. We make this list of gaps and potential improvements that we have identified, and we will observe key priorities, 10 or 12 key priorities issuing from that, and we will build our roadmap on that, and also draw some policy recommendations both at national and European level. I stop here for this introduction to SmartBuild for EU, and Alain will just conclude with some perspectives.
Well, those are really short-term perspective, but maybe also to give you some information about ongoing calls. The role of ECTP, among others, is of course to do some kind of vision, foresight, and road mapping work. And in this context, the topic of EPC, of the EPC have been, of course, analyzed as very, very important. And was defined indeed in one of the topic of the Build for People, which is a new partnership recently launched, Build for People Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda. And this is a way for us also to influence and to provide with hints to the European Commission to establish new goal. And indeed, there is an ongoing call, which is the efficient, which is related to the efficient, sustainable, and inclusive energy use, and which is a D4 in D401. And one of the call, indeed, D40101, is really concentrated on EPCs, but we convinced the European Commission that there should be high consideration, in particular with respect to the SRI. So this is why proposals submitted to this call should really demonstrate synergies with other relevant instruments and demonstrate the link between the EPC and typically the SRI, also the building renovation passports and relevant parts of levels, the levels framework. But the link with SRI is very, very important. So for those of you who are planning to submit some proposal to this call, it's of a paramount important that you dive into the details of the SRI. There will be now a nice presentation from Stein, and there will be many other discussions, I guess, around the SRI and the link with EPC. Thank you very much. That concludes our presentation. We tried to squeeze a little bit because I guess that we are slightly beyond schedule. And well, we will be open, of course, for future questions later on, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you both, Alain and Alexis. Thank you very much also for squeezing it a bit, because indeed we are delayed. So now it's Stein again, who has been so kind to moderate the beginning of this morning session, to take the floor. But before he commences, I'll just say that we had the policy keynote kindly given by Sylvain, which is, let's say, the current moment, the current status, and the next immediate steps with regards to SRI. Now we had Alain and Alexis that look a bit further in the future, not too far, but still the upcoming steps after the current situation. And now we get back, I would say, to the present moment, and Stein will nicely complement everything that Sylvain has shared with his presentation. Stein, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andre. For information, I'll be having another presentation later today on the in the scientific plenary on the contents of the SRI. This presentation is really dedicated to what we're currently doing with the SRI support contract that was already introduced nicely by Sylvain Robert. So, kind reminder of the timeline here, also introduced before, and we're really now into the process of taking what's been happening prior in the technical support studies, then established in these two legal acts, now bringing it to the people, starting the testing and implementation phases in the various member states. Potentially also with contributions of various research and innovation projects. And to support this whole phase of introducing the SRI on the market, European Commission Services has asked support of a contractor to help them with this, and it's a consortium led by Vito with the help of Weight Strategic Efficiency Europe, R2M Solutions, and LIST that's carrying out these services. We started in May 21 and we have a 2-year service contract. So in the next slides, I'll be giving you some further insights on what we actually will be doing and how that can potentially also connect to the things you're doing. I think we have mainly a public of people working in research projects right now. But also very interesting, after my presentation, we hear some reflections from member states and how they are at the moment testing and or implementing the SRI. First task is about providing resources and managing a help desk. And this help desk is currently online. You can contact us through support@smartreadinnessindicator.eu. And online, you can also already find some resources, including training packages and so on. And over time, that will, of course, grow with additional webinars and resources that you can look into. Importantly, for those of you who are working in a member state administration, the service contract will also provide adapted support. That's to say, we've recently launched a call to the member states asking what kind of dedicated, tailor-made support they would need, and in consultation with Commission services, we can provide this to you. Next, there's a task on establishing and operating this SRI platform. It's meant to be a forum to exchange between member states, between stakeholders such as practitioners, businesses, etc., on this testing and implementation phase of the SRI. We've heard about the topical group C, which was established during past technical support studies, which were really on the establishment of the SRI. We'll continue in the same vein now by also setting up topical groups, but with a different focus. We're still negotiating with the Commission what it will actually be. So we're looking into that. That will be announced probably in a few weeks in a new newsletter. I can already communicate, and that's new, so you're the first to hear, that this SRI platform meeting, the plenary, will take place on Thursday, the 16th of December, and we'll go for an online meeting. But details on how to participate, etc., you'll receive in due time. Next, a third task is on looking into the needs and further developing EU guidance on the implementation of the SRI. We'll cover a lot of topics. We'll actually also discuss with member states what needs they see, and for example, looking into elements such as qualification and training of experts to see if we can provide some European guidance on that to streamline this across member states. For example, one of the other tasks is looking into the design options of the SRI certificates. You see some examples developed during the technical support studies. We'll further work on that. Well, these are not the certificates, of course, but the logos, but we'll take next steps to see what things there could be common across EU. Fourth task is looking into the need for additional support beyond the support we're currently providing with the service contracts. For example, what further training is there needed? Is there a need to come to a common data management on the SRI for European member states? Is there a need to develop a common software tool, etc.? So we're really exploring the needs here, not per se developing, but talking to stakeholders, talking to member states to see what could be potential next stages for EU support. And then finally, the support contract also ventures into awareness raising and dissemination. And part of this dissemination will be materials that others, member states, or research projects can then take on and use to further disseminate to their audience. We'll provide materials in English, in French, and in German. I'll end with giving an overview of some public resources available to you. Here you find links to the legal text and annexes and such. So the slide decks will be available later on, so you can look into that. Also, welcome to check out the website, and you can already find there the training material and assessment guides, and you can subscribe to the SRI newsletter. And then importantly, I think to many of you working on these projects is also the SRI assessment package. This is an Excel-based, so a spreadsheet tool developed to support the SRI testing phase. Some of you might have used the previous version that we developed during technical support contracts. This is the next iteration with some more flexibility for users to add services, to rename them, to review scores and such. Also to translate the sheet to national languages. This sheet is available to those of you who want to test it, so to the member states who run the official testing phase, but also to individuals, to research projects. But importantly, there are some terms and conditions that apply, which are mainly have to do with you promising to share information back to us as a study team and the Commission services. You can see that there were some elements on this in the legal text, which of course apply to member states, but we want to have the same being applied to research projects. Next to that, there's some terms and conditions on communication, because of course this testing phase, this test Excel will not yield an official SRI certificate. And we really want to avoid confusion on the market, that people start at random issuing pretending that what they're doing is a certificate. No, that's not true for the time being. We are in a test phase. And it could, for example, be that some elements of the SRI can be contextualized. It might be that particular member states make their own mix of services or other service or adjust scores, etc. So let's be very careful on communicating. And a warm welcome, because I know some of the research projects are currently working with this file. Please make sure to have the proper disclaimer in place and highlight that what you're doing is probably not a national testing phase, but a test within a research project. So Thanks for taking care of that. If you want to access this assessment package, it will be available on the website in a few weeks from now. We're awaiting some updates on the CMS system. For now, you can obtain it by sending an email to support@Smart Readiness Indicator. We'll come back to you with an email asking to confirm terms and conditions and provide you with the necessary documents. All right, just a kind indicator, reminder once more to subscribe to the SRI newsletter. That way you'll be informed on the next updates. And I sneaked in a slide as well, because I know some repetition helps to really imprint it in your minds. Besides this support contract, there's also the SmartBuild for EU project. Both projects work well together. The SmartBuild for EU project is more dealing with the innovation part of things. The SRI support contract is more working now on the current implementation of what's now there on the table in terms of the common EU instrument that has been developed. So thank you for your attention, and happy to further be in touch with you guys. Andrei? Back to you, Andrei. I hope you are not facing problems. Okay, I'm afraid we're back into some connection problems from Andrei's side. I take the liberty to be host again for a while, and let's move on and go to the next presenter. Very happy to welcome Robert Stadler here, who will be providing us some insights on what's going on in one of the national testing phases, namely in Austria. Robert, the floor is yours. Robert, are you with us?
Maybe you should tell him, maybe he didn't ask to share audio and video.
Okay, it seems there's a problem because there are too many people now joining in with the video. So may I ask some people to disconnect their audio and video? Hopefully that will work and allow Robert to join us. Now, for the sake of time, I suggest we first switch to the next speaker, because I see Alan is online. Meanwhile, Robert can try to make his connection, if that's okay with you. Alan Hansen is also providing us some insights from what's happening at member state level, this time from Denmark, Danish perspective. So, Alan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stein, and thank you for all listening today. I think maybe if you could change the slide deck when I ask, it will be great. So I'll tell a little bit about the testing and the thoughts about this opportunity to test the SRI in a member state. I work on a daily basis in the Danish Energy Agency in Denmark. So next slide. In Denmark, we have made the decision of testing this SRI. It's also the opportunity is on a voluntary basis to test this SRI, and in Denmark we would be happy to do our own experience about this new tool. So we want to test the SRI in Denmark. Okay, next slide. And I want to tell a little about the thoughts of this SRI test. It's not an implementation of the SRI, it's a test. And what we are planning to do in Denmark is a project-based approach. So we want to identify whether the scheme could contribute with something new to the building owners and also to us as a member state, and also look about this SRI, this common European tool. How does it fit into a Danish context with our building heritage and so on? Are there any need to adapt it into a Danish context? And also we want to involve building owners and other stakeholders. As you mentioned, Stein, we would not. We will make sure to make a disclaimer about whether it's a certificate or not. And since it's just you could say a project, it's not the plan to issue certificates. We would like to engage with these building owners on a voluntary basis for those buildings we want to look into. So, okay, this was what we want to do. And the next slide, in addition, is about what we do not want to do. And as I said, it's not our approach to award these buildings with SRI certificates. It's more a project where we need to have do our own experience with this SRI tool. And we also do not want to do the other approach where building owners are making these certificates on their own and then report it to us as the energy agency. Of course, it's the building owners can use the assessment package available on the SRI platform and so on. But as the member states testing phase, we will do this as a project. Okay, next slide, where I want to evolve a bit this project with the three main subtasks. So first of all, we would have to calculate the SRI for a number of buildings. We would like to use the calculation sheet, and Stein, I think also we have been exchanging this SRI package by mail, and it is the calculation tool we would like to do as the basis of this project. So a number of building could be calculated this SRI performance. And on the buildings we have calculated, or we would like to interview the building owners after presenting some of the results for their buildings to get an idea of what the building owners think about this. Also for them, a new tool. So it's the first subtask, and the next is to get some input from the Danish context, as I said earlier. What are the strengths and weaknesses in the method, or is there anything relevant to change in addition to this Danish context? Maybe there's not any needs. Maybe there are. We don't know, and we would really like to find out. And the third subtask is this stakeholder involvement. In Denmark, I experienced some interest from several stakeholders, and we would like to not do this project as a closed process for us, but also involve stakeholders who would like to maybe know a bit more about this project. So one of the subtasks is to make a workshop doing the project, showing some of the sub results and telling a bit more about the early experience using this tool. So 3 subtasks where we hope to get both some, you could say, hardcore calculations about this SRI, but also get in touch with the relevant stakeholders. Okay, next slide. There are still for us some open-ended questions, which we also hope that the test could use. We could use the test to get more knowledge about. And I have listed the 3 of them here. I don't think I'll deep into all of them, but also one of the things we're looking into is the synergies between this SRI and the EPC schemes, which is also mentioned, I think, a lot in the whole process, both in the study and also in the acts. Yes, so it's I would say for us, you could call it a premature stage where we would like to get some knowledge in Denmark. Okay, next slide. Yes, I think that was all. I don't know if any questions. I can't see the chat right now, but I hope that was useful for some insights in the Danish approach about this testing. And I will say that the test has not yet started. We will make a call for tenders during this month, also October. And when anything is in place, I think we would say that the test starts when this call for tenders is over.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan.
Also from my
let's
side.
see if we can also capture some insights from other member states. It appears that Robert still is not one of the presenters.
Can you hear me now, Stijn? Andre here.
Yep.
Yeah, great.
Yes.
Thank you, Alan, also from my side. Indeed, it seems we have an issue. There can only be maximum 10 speakers at once. So that means that those that will be in the second part of our session are kindly asked to leave the speaker role. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. Maybe you need to leave the event and then join it again. But that's the only way we could allocate the speaker role to both Nicolas and, of course, to Robert. But for sake of timing, maybe because I see Biagio is already connected for the example in Italy, how the SRI is currently being planned for, maybe we can jump to Biagio, and in the meantime, we try to get Robert and Nicolas on board. Just a kind request to both Robert and Nicolas to kindly ask and send your request to share both audio and video. Thank you. Biagio, the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay, good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation to this workshop. My name is Biagio Di Pietra. I'm a researcher at the Energy Efficiency Department of ENEA. ENEA is the Italian National Agency for New Technology, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development. In my short presentation, I will show you the progress of SRI in Italy. And in particular, I tell you about the studies we are carrying out under a national research program. Next slide, please. Next. Thank you. At the moment, Italy has not yet decided whether and when to start a testing phase. It will depend on the results of some studies on SRI conducted in the framework of a national research program. We are carrying out several activities in different European working group. We have participated as a stakeholder in the first and in the second European technical study. We have presentation. We have participated in the first European beta testing of SRI, applying a first calculation methodology to 5 case studies, consisting of 2 office buildings, a school, a hospital, and a single family house. We are currently participating in the SRI working group of the Concerted Action APBD. Next slide, please.
Stein, actually, the shared screen is not working anymore. Maybe there has been a change in your role, or maybe something was affected, the fact that you were sharing the screen. Ah, now it's back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With regard the research in the Smart Readiness Indicator, we have started several studies on the application of SRI to the national building stocks. In collaboration with the University of Cassino, we analyzed the existing residential building stocks in order to estimate the potential SRI score for different building category. Moreover, we applied the SRI calculation methodology to several national office buildings equipped with different plans and smart technology to evaluate the total and the partial SRI score for each of these case studies. Now we started a market survey to calibrate and optimize the service and functional level for different types of national buildings. The results of this study will be able to support the national SRI evaluation. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Previous slide. Okay. Okay. Next slide. Sorry. Next slide. Okay. Sorry. In this slide, I show you a summary of the results of the first study carried out in collaboration with the University of Cassino about evaluation of the potential SRI score for different categories of the existing residential building stocks. As you can see in the slide, a maximum SRI score of 23% is obtained for two categories of existing residential building, and the maximum score increased to 31% by means of retrofitting action of existing technical systems. Next slide, please. Okay. The last slide shows the scheme and the first results of national market analysis and the calibration of the service catalog. We started a market survey with national stakeholder in order to optimize the service to be evaluated and the function level for different building types. In the current state, we are applying the optimized service catalog to some office buildings equipped with renewable plants and different smart technology. As you can see in the table, for two case studies, the total SRI score increased after the calibration of the service according to national market analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Biagio, to have taken the time to join us today. And yeah, apologies to everybody for the slight technical difficulties. I think we are all getting used to this hybrid way of doing things. It will run much smoother as time passes for all of us, and we have many more experiences as this one. Finally, we are able to hear and see Robert. Welcome, Robert. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Okay, great.
Yes.
So I'm sorry about my technical difficulties. I'm really not used to this platform at all, and it seems to have some hidden aspects. Let me just report briefly about the status of the SRI ambitions in Austria. We now, next slide please. we now have agreed on the political side, both with the federal regions and the national government, that we will start a national test phase. I'm not sure if this has been already reported to the European Commission in Brussels, but if not, then such a report is imminent. We are not looking at the moment at the market uptake of the SRI. We are much more interested in the further development and national adaptation of the method. And we see this test phase as a large-scale research project where a couple of our national researchers are involved, but also a lot of data is collected by people from the administration. We choose the option that is left open, both in the two technical reports by VITO and also in the Delegated Act and Implementing Act, to regard the three columns of the SRI as separate. So we will not have in our evaluation a single SRI for all three columns, that is energy flexibility, energy savings for building automatization, and column health, comfort, and convenience, but we aim at having three separate SRIs, one for each column. And we will apply the method by VITO for our analyzation, but also other national methods that are partly based on it and partly different. Next slide, please. That is just a quick assessment of the VITO method. In our thinking, it's a qualitative assessment, so it just accounts services and calculates a percentage on the basis of which services out of a catalog exist or don't exist. Next slide, please. We also have a method which we call SRI Austria, which has been published in 2020 by one of our ministries. This is very much based on the VITO method, but it has a changed weighting of the three columns. So the column convenience and health is kind of dimmed down to a maximum of 10% of the total SRI, and energy flexibility has 50% and energy savings has 40%. Next slide, please. Then there's a much more radical approach by one of our university researchers. She has a method for the SRI which is exclusively focused on energy flexibility. It's a quantitative method which aims at quantification of the CO2 emissions, and it is based on the ability of the building to store energy, either electrically with batteries or thermally or even as gas. And the second important quantity apart from the storage capability of a building is its connection to the energy grid. So that's also a method that we'll look at on our next slide, please. And then there's a fourth method which comes out of research of the International Energy Agency in Annex 82, which is also very much based on a quantitative assessment of the SRI as an energy flexibility indicator. And our aim is to compare all these methods, even if possible or if advisable, from hybrids of this method, because what we want to do is have a maximal impact with our research and our test phase on the discussion on the European level, and our ultimate goal is to arrive at the SRI assessment process where it, according to the method C, the SRI is calculated automatically and therefore objectively, and it doesn't depend on the evaluators or assessors which value you get for a given building, and our focus is on energy efficiency and the reduction of CO2 emissions. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Robert. And I'm personally really glad that you managed to join. As myself, I also encountered technical issues. So we still have next Nicolas Cabassoud explaining the situation in France. I saw Nicolas in the list, but I think we're again at 10. If there's anybody from R2M with technical assistance, I saw you can manually exclude somebody or include somebody else. Maybe if you could, for example, I see Christiana is a speaker. Actually, she's for the second part. Maybe if you could take that role from her and give it to Nicolas. That would be excellent.
I have removed 2 persons. I'm not sure if I can add Nicolas.
Then Nicolas, if you can hear us, could you please click the blue button? It should be the only blue button that says something, share audio and video, or ask to share.
Maybe I can't see him here.
You click on the name and
There he is.
Hear me? It's okay? Okay.
Yes. All right. Finally, we can hear you, Nicolas.
It's coming.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicolas. So the floor is yours, please.
Okay. I hope the sound is good. I
Yes.
don't see the video, but if the sound is good, it's essential. Okay. So good morning, everybody. Of course, I apologize in advance for my English is not very very good and very fluent, so I apologize in advance. Okay, so I'm going to show you our situation in France, and so you can go to the next slide. And first, I want to show you how France is interesting by the SRE, because she follow European development since 1917, We participate to the work group A, B, and C. So hey, like I think Stig has make some presentation of this work group, but well, rapidly, the first work group A is about implementation and different development of design and so on. And the work group B, methodology and C, feedback to make I think a recommendation for the next years and be and make a better SRE in the future. So a real interest of France with this new indicator, and we plan to test in April 2022. So next year's this SRE. So next slide. I'm going to show you our provisional schedule. So you can see our first step. It's an action about tools. So we have to make a preparation. A preparation of calculation tools. In fact, it consists to adapt the European tool, because very good job of the Commission, who give us package, complete package with tools and the element of different element of communication. So we have to make some adaptation to take into account our specificity. So we have sometimes around 4 months to be sure that we want to keep and to hide in this calculation sheet. It's tools in Excel form. Okay, next step. Next slide. Sorry. So in parallel, we have to make a communication, of course, and it consists here again to resume the call for expression of interest of the Commission, and we're going to diffuse in our community and our stakeholder the volunteer to deploy the SRE. So next slide. So you understand that we have to develop our platform, our French platform, because it's a necessity for diffuse the information and permit to download French tools and so on. So we have a specific tab in our website who speak about all element of regulation in the building. So we have a French regulation for new construction and regulation of different aspects for EPC, and we create a tab specific for SRI. So next slide. We plan to make a recruitment of diagnostician, only this profile, because it's easier for now and for the beginning, because they have follow a training course in coherence with the implemented act or delegated act. I don't remember, but it's easier for us because all the training package is ready, and the diagnostician is a better profile to make this experiment. So we have not not enough effort to make for this. Can go to the next slide. And next, and we start, and we hope to be ready to start the SRE assessment in April. Of course, during these first years of experiment, we continue to diffuse different information and communication about SRE communication for diffuse information in the market, different tools who could be a date, for example, and so on. And just to focus, I don't speak about the punctual event. We don't know how the SRE will integrate the market. So we plan to make different punctual event to communicate more if it's necessary. In this slide, it's indicate on December and February, but it could be during during 2022 when we test the SRE. So next slide. Okay, so our choice is really to stay close to the method for facilitate the comparison. So we don't make we have a very few specificity of this first application. In case for this first years, we chose to test two methods, both method A and B, and we have to define the perimeter of this assessment. We chose to bring together with the EPC because we have a specific perimeter, and we apply this perimeter to the method A and B. So as you can see in this slide, method A, it's for individual house or apartment, and B, entire collective residential building and non-residential buildings like tertiary. It's the same perimeter for the two indicators, SRE and EPC, because we have in France an objective is to make together these two indicators, and it's an evidence for the community. So after we have another specific point is to define that is mandatory domain, and that's in we don't let people to make our choice. It's in France the domain will be assess or not assess, and no choice. For example, we have some regulation on ventilation, so it's impossible for building a smart building to have to have a natural ventilation without control flux and so on. So we have some adaptation of the tools to on this point for all domain. It's specific, and we will compare very easily all evaluation for the French part, of course. After we don't change the open weighting to facilitate the feedback. It's the same spirit. Because it's very difficult to have a specific weighting. In the future, for the next year or next application, we have an idea to develop a specific weighting, but it will be only on a specific criterion. And of course, I have ever say that user depositing pool for SRE. We have a pool of diagnosticant, and we're going to use this pool to make official assessment. Okay, you can go on the next slide. For the moment, we don't make a lot of modification, very few specificity, but we identify 2 points very important for us, and point that we develop on the second step of experiment, second years maybe, in 2023. It's the implementation for connectivity and interoperability. This point is identified on the delegated act, of course, but we have to work and to share with different French stakeholder on this point to be agree on a specific assessment on this point, and of course adapt the weighting of the building configuration only on criterion, energy saving criterion and maintenance, and I don't remember, but it was shown in different contribution on the work group B. It's the same methodology and the same okay. We have to bring together EPC and SRE, so EPC is focused on energy, so some criterion can be adjusted with this methodology. So it's a first step to adapt everything with another methodology, and the methodology used in France during several years. Okay, just I want just add a point. I don't speak about it, and it's not in this presentation. It's about our fear. We develop a lot of energy and time and spend time for develop SRE in France, and we hope to have a lot of volunteers, but it's a fear to have only a few volunteers. So we're going to see how our deployment touch the market, because for the moment it's very voluntary. Maybe we thought to use some incitation, financial incitation, but it's very complicated, and we haven't got enough money for all potential volunteers. So the first step, it's only with the communication, and we will see how the market will react. Okay, thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Nicola, and all the other guest speakers. I sincerely apologize because we have a very packed, I would say, program. Our endeavor or dream was to put everything in one shot. We are now very used to vaccination, for example, for COVID purposes. We imagine this as the SRI shot, that you have everything in one go in our session. Apologies for these technical difficulties that we've encountered. But due to the fact that we have this packed program, there won't be any Q&A for the first session. And in the second part, we will focus on the Next Gen EPC Horizon 2020 cluster of projects. There we will have the interactive element of our today's hybrid workshop. However, in general, our aim with this event is not to draw any conclusions, but to really start up the debate and ensure an open dialogue with all the key actors that are working on this, and support each other, and be sure we don't reinvent the wheel. We are as resource effective as possible, and we share the experiences. I'll stop there with everything, because I think in the venue in Rome, in our room, people are already going to grab a coffee or something like that, or a drink. So I think we should all take a few minutes. We still have 15 minutes until the second part of our session. So let's take a short break, and we'll be back then at 11 o'clock. We hope now we've learned all the lessons needed with Hopin, and everything will go smoothly in the second part of our session. Apologies again for all the inconveniences that our technical issues might have caused. And many thanks again, Stein, for taking up the moderator role also in the first part of our workshop. So hear you all in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. We are getting close to 11 o'clock when the second part of our workshop will continue. We still have a few minutes to go, so those in the audience that are with us, please have a bit more patience. We will do a final test just to be sure people can share and unshare the speaker role. Maybe Stein, if you could be so kind to share again the slide deck and specifically the slide where we have all the panelists, so that we can go one by one and each of the panelists can share and unshare. Just to be, yeah, sure that at least the second part will run smoothly.
You should also be welcome to remove me as a speaker. I'm not sure I can do that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Alan. Thank you for your proactive request. I don't know, Stein, I think you were able to do that, to remove some speakers to free up the slots. Is that correct?
I think so, but I don't think I have any more rights than you do, so it would be more practical if you could do, because when I'm sharing a screen, I cannot see the Hopin interface.
Okay, let's see.
So I have a moderator panel down below, but if you just click on a person with the 3 bullets, you can...
Ah, yes, indeed. Thank you. So let's see. Excellent. Okay, then we do it like this in tandem, Stein. That's great. If you could then please share the screen again with all the panelists, then we can go one by one. And I'll do this part then, Stein. I'll see whoever you are interacting with at a certain moment, and as soon as that is over, I can remove and free up slots.
Suggestion, Andre, maybe when I ask the question, I could call out the names of the people that I intend to ask it directly to. So people know they should be shifting and making sure that their audio is on.
Yeah, that's good. But could you maybe now just share the slide so that we can just be sure that this works well? Or it's anyhow 11 o'clock. I think maybe we should keep the time and yeah, just let's say learn by doing again. So thank you everybody for staying with us. I see that we have the same number of attendees as this morning. Thank you for your patience with our first session. And actually, I would just like to steal a couple of minutes to make a point also based on our experience this morning vis-a-vis technology, and just a couple of points on what I wanted to say in the welcome introduction part. If you could go back, Stein, please. There were a couple of slides, and one with text. I don't plan to read anything, of course. Just on the second slide, there were some images.
You want me to go back to the beginning of the presentation, Andre?
Yes, that's correct. Sorry, I wasn't clear enough. Yes, here. That's the one. Perfect. So just one word on this one. One point. By the way, you've seen this in the promotion activities, I'm sure. We had a REHVA Journal article, let's say, outlining where we are today. Of course, since that article came out, a lot of other information, additional information, has been published, as Sylvain and Stein both mentioned in their presentations. And as we move along with our event, as I said also when we closed the first part, our main aim is to bring all of these activities together to ensure that, let's say, we are as effective as possible and we avoid doing things in parallel, which would be in a way counterproductive, and we at least have an open dialogue. And this is meant for all the EU initiatives, also activities of our member states in the European Union. And of course, the SRI, as it was in the title of our event, has an enabling, I would say, aspect to it. With regards to energy performance certificates, but also to other instruments that are listed here on screen in the second paragraph. And we should always remember that there is something behind this. We are not having an SRI for the sake of having an SRI, and we are not undergoing this smart building transformation or digital transformation in Europe. This is actually meant to help us arrive by 2050, as you can see on the screen, at a healthy, safe, efficient, flexible, and sustainable built environment. That's the ultimate goal, of course, not the smartness in its own, but it does have a facilitating and enabling effect. And if you could go now, Stein, to the second one, please. Yes, and I think it's even better that I do this intro here in the second part, because in the next generation energy performance certificates Horizon 2020 cluster, as projects, we are now 11. That's why also our event is so packed. It's not easy to bring all 11 projects together, in addition to the guest speakers, our kind guest speakers that took the time to join our first part of the workshop. But we can show that we are already walking the talk. So we always say that we want to go far, and for that we need to go together. And this is the transition part, and maybe this is my bias. It's the bright future, not the dark one. Of course, this cannot happen like flipping a light switch. There will always be some intermediary, I would say, steps. However, it's high time we do this together. And just to illustrate technology, so we have technology. If you look around yourself or at your screen, or in the room you're sitting, at the venue, or in your home office or office, you're surrounded by technology itself, or everything you see has technology behind it to have been extracted, manufactured. And just to highlight one element, this technology is there. We created it for us. It's meant to make our lives easier on Earth, and we should use that. We should not be afraid of it. But one caveat, which was highlighted in this session this morning, is that you need a bit of training here and there. And you can go by learning and doing, of course, but you will have some hiccups, but you will get there anyhow. And this just shows now we are able to use the Hopin platform as we should have been earlier this morning. But at least myself, I didn't have any prerequisite training, as it was pointed out. So I'll stop there. I think we can bring this into reality. There's already technology available there to do this. We just need to ensure we apply it as it was intended to be applied. And it will bring all the promises, whether it's instruments, political instruments, or tools, digital tools, or the actual technology itself in the buildings. I'll stop there. I'll just say, follow all of us on LinkedIn, Twitter, also myself. I'm trying to facilitate as much as possible these activities at the cluster level. Thank you, Stein, for that, and thank you, everybody, for your patience. So now, Stein, I think it's best that I hand you over. In this second part, you are the moderator, per se. So I will free up the floor for you to guide us through all the questions we have prepared together, and hopefully continue the debate and actually open up an extended debate with all the stakeholders that we've managed to put together today, and the broader stakeholder community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. And indeed, the intention is to have a more open discussion right now. It will be a challenge doing it in this hybrid way, or actually more online, since there are plenty more people joining online than here in the room, but still also people in the room, welcome, as well as our online listeners. Let's try to make it as interactive as possible. So I welcome the speakers also to be brief in their answers and, if possible, react on comments made by earlier presenters, etc., to really make it to an interactive discussion. And let's start by doing, by means of a little tour de table, one question that is directed to all of the 11 panelists, all related to European research and innovation project. With this one question, I ask you to very briefly introduce yourself and your project, and already explain us how your project is working on this topic that we're discussing today, is working on energy performance certification and the SRI. So what exactly is it that you are focusing on? There'll be plenty of time to go in more detail later on, so please restrict your answers to 2 minutes if possible. All right. First person up is Maria Fernandez. Maria.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so thank you, Steve, for giving me the floor, and I'm going to try to be very brief. EPCerts project is mainly focused on the inclusion of actual building data into energy modeling with the aim of reducing the performance gap and increasing accuracy, reliability, and acceptance of EPCs. Within EPCerts project context, a key aspect for the successful implementation of the SRI scheme is its integration within existing schemes. In our view, either official mandatory like the EPC, or within into other voluntary schemes like environmental levels, for example. Because of that, under EPCerts project, we are exploring how relevant aspects of the Smart Readiness Indicator could best be integrated within national EPC schemes across the 6 project countries. This approach includes several opportunities, such as a common use of data sources for both assessment, the inclusion of smartness-related performance improvement in the energy performance calculation methods, and the use of the energy balance from the EPC to improve default values within the SRI calculation. On the other hand, we have also developed an inventory of smart and novel technologies and its prioritization with the objective of taking their impact on energy savings into account within the energy assessment methodology. In this way, it could contribute to future developments regarding the SRI, as well as to build the link between next generation of EPCs and the SRI. Besides, the digitalization of information through the use of common databases, easily accessible through web platforms, is also part of the EPCerts project. The SEPAP, the Smart Energy Performance Assessment Platform under development, will integrate all energy-related data of the building assessed, and at the same time, we aim to include the SRI assessment. Thus, all related information for EPC and SRI assessment will be integrated in a common platform, allowing synergies and opportunities to carry out both assessment at the same time. So this is our approach, more or less.
Okay, thank you, Maria. So same question will now be addressed to Mikhail, I hope I pronounce it well, of the EDICE project.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Yes, you pronounce my name very well, Michał. Let me introduce EDICE project in regards to the Smart Readiness Indicator. And I would like to cast a little bit light on where our project actually contribute with that regard. SRI is about the ability and capability in other words, readiness, to reflect on three aspects. This is to optimize energy efficiency, taking account for change of conditions. The second aspect is about adoption of operation to needs of occupants. And third is to adapt signals from the grid. All of these three aspects are dynamic aspects, so high resolution aspects. If we look on the other hand, current EPCs, so the calculation methodologies that are available in different countries, they are based on steady state calculation approaches. I'm not speaking for all of the countries, but probably majority of the calculation is currently done in that way. So many of the input parameters and the outputs are static. And probably you can see already now that we have a gap between SRI and current EPCs. One is highly dynamic and another one is highly steady state. What we are doing currently in what is done in SRI is using a catalog of assessments. This is the first level as I would see it. The future, as Bonnie said, Bonnie Brook in the first presentation, is towards the data-driven assessment. And this is actually where I can say the EDICE is contributing. We are in EDICE working towards dynamic calculations to provide EPCs. So we are not strictly contributing to SRI, but we are contributing to the gap between these two schemes, I would say, EPC and SRI. So we are developing the methodology towards moving the calculation to the dynamic environment, hourly based calculations, allowing for assessment of the performance of the building using the standard performance and modified standard performance, and also supporting this with some measurements that are available in the buildings in order to derive a number of key performance indicators from discipline of energy, indoor comfort, and system operation. And by that also in order to reflect on the performance gap between our assessments, asset assessments, and actual performance of the building. So I would say we are identifying this, what Bonnie has mentioned, as a one indicator at a time for selected functionality of performance metrics, which is a very challenging work, to be honest. So this is I would say we are contributing to probably to the future of the SRI.
Okay. Well, I think we all are, but thank you, Michael, for the explanation you gave, especially also on the dynamic simulation aspect. There'll be a question later on, so others are welcome to react at that instance. Let's continue with the tour de table with short answers on what your project is working on. So try to limit it to 2 minutes. Challenge is on for Maarten de Grote. And next I call for Christiana and Maaike to make sure to also connect. Maarten.
Yes, thank you, Stan, to give me the floor. 2 minutes on Extendo. What was actually the starting base of the Extendo idea was that we see that there's a large variety across Europe on challenges of the energy renovation that we need. For example, in Poland, huge problems with smoke. District heating in Belgium is really early phase, while in the Nordic countries, it's very well advanced. If comfort is a very large driver for renovation, and we use it as a starting point where we said, okay, let's create a kind of a pool for different EPC features or how EPCs could further evolve towards the next generation of EPCs. And so we actually provide a method and a calculation tool of these 10 features across Europe that it can be tested. And these features go from a smartness indicator, but also air pollution, comfort indicator, logbook aspect, and how to improve your EPC databases. And these are currently being tested in 29 test projects in 9 different member states, and from which the SRI is one. We are running the SRI, very important, as a research test in Austria, Estonia, Greece, and Romania over different building types. I think that's a short introduction on Extendo. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Maarten. And let's now go to Christiana of the D2 EPC project.
Hello, Sin. Hello, everybody. I'm Christiana Panderli. I'm representing D2 EPC, the cluster projects of Next Generation EPC started on 2020. I'm going to give you some our visions of our project on the SRI development and the links of SRI to EPCs. D2 EPC scheme envisions to develop all the links of EPC and SRI at this current state, at least, by defining the required procedures of extracting the SRIs, utilizing both EPC input data and also BIM data through digital twins. The innovation of this approach lies on the fact that a large amount of data are required to develop and issue the EPC is already available in BIM models. Also, the BIM models also and EPC input data will also support the development, the issuance of SRI as well. So the main output, the outcome of this linkage is we'll have a dynamic EPC in a to calculate the SRI in a mandatory way. An SRI assessment will be also offered to the users each time an EPC is conducted. So we would like to raise the awareness about the benefits of smart technologies and ICT buildings to motivate consumers to accelerate the investments on smart building technologies. And I would like to say that this is one of our indicators. D2EPC has also other indicators for exactly this reason, to make the EPCs more user-friendly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christiana. Let's now see what Mike has to tell on the Quality EPC project.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Marthe van Jacob. I'm representing the Quality EPC project on high quality energy performance assessment and certification in Europe, accelerating deep energy renovation. That's the full title. And as the title already says, the focus of our project is to improve the quality and the cross-EU convergence of EPCs, and also the link between EPCs and deep renovation. Based on several national stakeholder workshops, we have identified 7 development priorities to improve the existing EPC schemes. And amongst others, this includes a more user-friendly EPC, including also improved recommendations for renovation. And these enhanced EPCs have been pilot tested in more than 100 buildings so far in our project countries. And we received more or less only positive feedback from the building owners and also from the EPC issuers. Well, as I said, we focus on more deep renovation, EU conversions. So unfortunately, Quality EPC does not have a direct link to SRI, and therefore I cannot answer the question right to the point. I just have some remarks based on Quality EPC experience. And though the EPC schemes are based on the same EU directive, the national implementation of EPCs varies very broadly. In some countries, they are necessary to receive financial support for energy renovation, but in many countries, it's more just perceived as a burden rather than an opportunity. And in addition to EPCs, there are building renovation passports, building logbooks, the SRI, and there are more and more certifications and applications. But in order to have a high quality certification or application that are of real use for the building owners and also for the stakeholders, it would be necessary to reach a higher cross-EU convergence, and also this convergence on a high quality basis. And maybe this leads to the idea to probably combine all the elements into one comprehensive certificate or passport or whatever. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We'll continue our tour de table with first up Andre, and I invite David and Boris to also connect.
Yes, hello. I hope you can hear me, Stein. Excellent. So I'm wearing now my EPCert hat. Previously, I had my REHVA hat. And EPCert stands for User-Centered EPCs. And I start by saying that because the EPCs had a clear purpose to begin with. There seems to be some microphone. Boris, could you maybe mute yourself?
Yeah, I will try to do it.
I hope now it's gone. Yes, it should be good. As I said, the EPCs had a specific purpose, and that was to raise awareness and trigger actions. And that's why in EPCert, we focused on the people that are behind the EPCs and that are affected by the EPCs. And we looked in more detail how this can be improved. And actually, that's where the SRI comes in. Because in order to bring the EPCs, the current EPCs, which in most cases are asset rating, so it's a snapshot at a certain moment in time under some standardized conditions, in order to make that bring that closer to day-to-day activities, we need to go, as some of my colleagues already said, to operational rating. And we see the SRI as an enabler for that, in the sense that just by looking at the current assessment, the SRI assessment, you can easily single out from that which elements, which functionalities are needed to add next to the asset rating, which of course is needed. But next to it, to have the operational rating, you can easily prepare a recipe, what technology is needed to get there. And then you can quantify as that technology, from the moment that technology is there, you can have the operational rating and get closer to day-to-day activities and make it meaningful for those that are, let's say, affected with air quotes by building performance. And finally make this shift, because I think building performance often is perceived as a one-off exercise or once in a while, when in fact it's actually a continuous process. It's not something that has a start and end. It's something that goes on with the building's life cycle, I would say, like life in general. And this is more the future. We rely on the set of energy performance of building standards for the common framework that has been set for building performance calculation, both asset rating and operational rating. This is more the future, I would say, what we are doing in SRI for the testing phase that's now currently planned and will soon shape up in all member states. We have tested in EPCert since we started in 2019. We've tested all the methodologies prepared so far. We participated in all the testing phases supported by the team contracted by the European Commission. And we will do this again now with the improved version. And furthermore, what we will do in EPCert sometime in spring next year, we will prepare a web-based interface for the SRI assessment, let's say taking it to the immediate next step. It's not a fully blown, I would say, visually friendly interface, but it's one step further than a spreadsheet. Because if we want to make it user-friendly and trigger changes and actions, then we need to make it as interactive as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. So EPCert focused on the users. David, can you tell us what CrossCert focuses on?
Yes, I can certainly try. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Jenkins from Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. So I work on the CrossCert project. We're only 4 weeks old, so we don't even have a logo yet. But our overall aims are to look at improving the accuracy and usability of EPCs, taking a more people-centric design approach and thinking about the user experience by engaging with target user groups, and also looking at the possibility of increased homogeneity and harmonization of EPCs across different European countries. So we have currently a sample of 140 buildings in our 10 member countries involved with the project. So we're looking to take on board the work, such as the SRI work, to construct technical guidelines for next generation EPCs, We'll then be running both current baseline EPCs and future EPCs across our sample buildings. But we'll be doing that using what we call a co-production workshop approach, where we engage with identified target user groups, understand first of all how they value the kind of the new metrics being introduced into next generation EPCs. So how they value them, but also to what extent they understand them, how they interpret them, how they might use them. Then we test it through the buildings themselves, and then as we get towards the end of what's a 3-year project, and we have more kind of finalized guidelines for these next generation EPCs, we sort of test that again on these user groups to understand actually when you have this final product, this final next generation EPC as a product, how are these different user groups gonna interpret that information? Are they going to use that information in the way that those metrics have actually been designed? We also have a strong element on sort of quality control and verification. So it's particularly challenging when you have a large number of European countries within one project. You can have next generation metrics or the overall next generation EPC and assessment framework. That might work very well in one country, but because of differences in calculation methodologies and also the wider assessment framework, you might find it's not so appropriate for another country. So that affects the harmonization angle of the work, but it also affects the kind of quality control and verification procedure, because it's very difficult to get consistency across different countries in how the next generation EPCs are applied if you don't have consistency in how the calculation procedures and the overall assessment framework is run. So we'll be testing that and looking at what the limits are to harmonizing, actually not just current EPCs, but these future EPCs that we'd be testing out on our building stock. But very happy to have further conversations with these other Horizon projects working in the same area.
Okay, thanks a lot, David. And let's already jump to one other project working on this area. Boris, can you introduce TimePack to us?
Hello, thank you very much for this really nice workshop. I'm glad that I can be today with you. I'm representing the TimePack project. TimePack stands for the Towards Innovative Methods for Energy Performance Assessment and Certification of Buildings. In this context, we consider the Smart Readiness Indicator as a tool for our platform for actually enabling sector coupling, which means that we are looking for the innovative approaches to connect the flexibility to enable building users, building managers, and also the energy service companies to explore the flexibility of buildings in the future smart networks. In this context, we are trying to determine dependency of information requirements between Smart Readiness Indicators and Energy Performance Certification. Of course, we will work together with the identified stakeholders, like I mentioned, building managers, ESCOs, to prepare the framework for the Smart Readiness Indicator. From the context of building owners and users, they are interested in monetization of that flexibility potential. I'm really glad that in all pilot cases in all our 6 countries, Italy, Slovenia, Spain, Croatia, Austria, and Cyprus, we will also check existing databases, and we examine the available data in order to find flexibility potential that can be further utilized and monetized on the flexibility market. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be glad to answer to any question that will rise during the discussion.
Thanks a lot, Boris. Very interesting. I'm sure the following project is also interesting. Alexander, can you introduce IB Road to EPC?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, this opportunity, and the overall work that has been taking place in the next generation of EPCs cluster, which we recently joined. IB Road to EPC is a very recent project. It started the 1st September officially. but we are the follow-up of a project that was recently completed quite successfully, Ivy Road, working on individual building renovation roadmaps. Our intention is to bring forward the next generation of EPCs by integrating into EPCs elements that come from the building renovation passports and from the digital building logbooks. A key element are the customized recommendations for renovation of buildings, and these can, if handled correctly, support the European Union climate ambitions by strongly supporting stepwise deep renovations, and stepwise is a key element. But I will focus now on another part, which is the methodology which we propose, which is a holistic methodology, in which case we want to achieve from every element of a building, everything from the envelope to the systems, the best possible approach, the best possible result. So not what we could call cost optimal. In this respect, the smartness indicator, the Smart Readiness Indicator, has a key role to play. I would say, I would call it render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, in the sense of what is relevant to the systems should follow other aspects, let's say that the envelope or other aspects of the buildings that are very critical for the energy improvement. Another key element is the limiting the performance gap. This, I think, has been already covered greatly by the presentations of other projects that mentioned the static aspect of EPCs and the dynamic aspect of the actual energy performance. One last point, which I would consider critical, we've mentioned integrating elements into the EPCs, but there is the EPC process, the certification, the assessment and certification process, which relies on trained experts. So what we would consider here is that the experts that create the EPCs, the experts that do the audits that lead to the renovation roadmaps in the case of Ivy Road, and the experts who produce the Smart Readiness Indicator should ideally be the same people, or at least follow a very integrated and consistent approach in order for everything to work together harmonically. That's it for my part. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. 2 more projects to go. I hope we have Peter and Sylvain with us. Hi, Peter.
Yes, hello, good day. Thank you for the intro and for the invitation. I'm representing here EUB SuperHub project, which stands for European Building Sustainability Performance and Energy Certification Hub. And as you can imagine from this full title, we focus on sustainability issues, because building performance is the beauty is that it can be approached from a purely energetic point of view and from the environment point of view. And at the end, we recently, our EU initiatives, or most of them, are focusing on environment. Thus, we consider in the project that sustainability indicators should be emphasized in the future as well. In the consortium members, therefore, we have sustainability ratings operators. Now, this is really interesting because some of these ratings in national and regional scale are connected to funding for renovations. That's what we are looking at, how let's say the common EPCs can be merged merged with the sustainability indicators. And of course, we would like to also involve the wider public to this, so we will consult with a lot of people. We have a dedicated work package for assessing the user needs, how they understand, how they perceive what the certification means for them, because basically without users you won't be able to create a very effective system for renovations and application for funding and those sorts of things. So basically those are the key elements. Obviously we have demonstration case studies, and hopefully we will learn a lot from these case studies. Thank you.
Last but not least in our list of projects, we have Sylvain presenting us EPC Recast.
Yeah, thank you, Stein. So indeed, EPC Recast is a project which started last year. It aims to develop an innovative process and methodology with regards to the next generation energy performance certificates, focusing on our 7 participating countries, member states. It also comprises specific work on a digital toolbox platform to develop and validate these EPCs, and focuses, also quite important, on residential buildings specifically. So the idea, as you understand, is to have a step-based approach while involving assessors, owners, as well as policymakers towards improvements in the EPC calculation methodology on the one hand, as well as the template itself, with a view of delivering, in particular, renovation recommendations to the owners. But in the meantime, as said, we focus on digital tools that will support both the data collection, but also the calibration of those assessments, thanks to real-time data provided by dynamic sensors or equipment. We have a target of 150 pilot dwellings in the project, which will, of course, provide some strong and interesting feedback from those 7 countries. And almost half of them will be monitored on the long term. So it will not be just a one-shot, let's say, testing of the EPC certificate, but long-term monitoring, which will contribute to this calibration methodology that we foresee. And that's where I guess there is a strong connection with the SRI, as of course, calibration based on real-time data will need some, or will require some smart readiness from the building side and its equipment. So this is the first contribution. I would say the SRI indicator as a mean for the energy assessment and calibration. And we also target a very specific focused technological work on the use of BIM for the SRI calculation. I'll probably come back to that later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvain. Thank you for all of the speakers. If I didn't miss one, I think we had all 11 projects. So that's quite a lot of expertise that we have collected here. Also means that for the sake of time, we need to be brief, and we'll not be able to have all answers being answered by all of the projects. So we'll try to have the questions pinpoint to specific projects. Some questions have been prepared, and the panelists have been able to see it. I'm curious to know the answers, but also warm welcome to the people here in the audience or online. If you have some questions that you want to direct to a specific panelist or to all of the projects, raise your hand here in the room or just put it in the chat, and we'll make sure to also take that on board. All right, let's get started with the more specific questions, and it has been discussed already by some of the project, but maybe some of you want to add some additional thoughts on how the SRI could leverage EPCs and vice versa. What's the benefit of looking at them both together? If I'm not mistaken, I think Andre and Maria had something to say on this. But if others are interested to share their thoughts, please also sign up again, add your audio and add into the discussion. Yes, Maria.
Okay. I can start then. Okay. Yes, in EPCs project, we have developed a cross analysis of EPC and SRI requirements through the 6 EPCs countries. And after that, we can say that implementing a combined EPC SRI assessment presents many opportunities, but also some challenges. We have identified high complementary between the SRI and the national EPC schemes, but our analysis shows very little synergies between the input data included in the EPC assessment of the EPCs countries and the fields required to assess the SRI using method A. Although this is true that some countries appear to be better positioned to integrate the SRI methodology into their current EPC scheme. However, it is important to highlight the fact that when information required differs, EPC and SRI data fields are obtained through the same building component. This means that acquiring the additional information to assess the SRI could be integrated in the EPC assessment in a time, cost-efficient manner. But on the other hand, it's true that the SRI cannot be calculated with the data stored from previous EPC assessment, no? Because specific SRI information is normally not gathered during on-site EPC visits. Beyond the addition of valuable content, the information required to assess the SRI can be used to improve the quality and reliability of current EPC schemes. Indeed, the SRI could complement the current EPC approach by adding important assessment information in relation to fault detection, to occupants' comfort and health, as well as grid and renewable energy sources integration. Also, we think that this information could be used to complement tailored recommendations already provided by the EPC report. So this is more or less our findings for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Andre, do you have some further thoughts on this?
Yes, I'll be really brief. So just to complement what Maria said or reconfirm, indeed, if you look at the data available from previous EPC assessment, you would need additional data, so additional effort. But if you think about the process of preparing the EPC, the SRI is, let's say, a no-regret choice to have included there because it's basically close to zero additional effort because the data is readily available, and it was available even in past EPC assessment exercises, although it's not included in the EPC, the report, or the let's say the front page in any way. So in EPCert, we have this vision that this would be a perfect match, a perfect marriage for the future. And what I said in my previous intervention, it would actually make steps in this direction of triggering action, because that's what the EPCs are meant to do. They are meant to raise awareness and trigger action. And one first step could be to get operational rating also there, because that would make all building performance elements, whether it's energy efficiency, flexibility, comfort, etc., it would make them visible. Because currently now, most of them are invisible, and people in general, the lay persons, they don't see them, so they don't see a need to act on them. But once this gets into, let's say, usual day-to-day activities, this will change significantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Does anybody want to add to this? If not, I'll jump in on your latest comments on the operational data. That's actually something that many of the projects are working on, either looking into operational data to support EPCs, or, which is kind of similar, looking to dynamic thermal simulations, also coming to some additional insights on comfort and such. And I know many of your projects are working on this. Can some of you clarify how that would also enhance SRI or vice versa? Whether you need info from SRI to be able to make the EPC more dynamic? I'm specifically looking to Mikael, Alexander, Peter, but I think many more of you would have interesting thoughts on this. Or David or Boris. Aha, we have Mikael with us.
Yeah, I'm playing with the button. Sorry, I'm also not used to this one. It takes, I don't know if you can see me or hear me. Yes. The question was about the dynamic, yes, nature of the building and how to include them in SRI. Well, yes, I think it's of course the future, and it's a challenge. This question, I raised this question actually myself when we were preparing the questions for the panelists, and I can see 5 out of 7 projects has indicated they're willing to somehow take this question and answer it to or debate on it, which to me itself indicate that it is interesting question that is in focus of many of the projects. So that is first. Second thing is that I work closely with buildings, and what we can see in these new buildings that are reflecting actually this high level of this smart readiness, that they have ICT, they have smart technologies, very often very complicated systems, and they are present in the building. And what SRI is doing is simply quantifying it based on the presence of the system, but not with respect if the systems are actually operating as meant. And these are two things. System can be present in the building, but can operate very different from the design assumptions. So to me, SRI at the present level where it is of course to identify if the technologies are there. But the future is to identify if the technology or quantify if the technology is actually operating as it should. One way to do that is to use the modeling tools. But to my best knowledge, not all of these technologies we will be able to reflect and mimic in the tools. The second thing is that this is a very time-consuming process to actually capture all of this dynamic nature in these tools. So we have, if we have an ambition to do that by using the tools, we have to look for some simplification approaches. If the method and if this is supposed to be adopted by many buildings, by many building owners, because somebody at the end has to pay the bill for all of these activities and the effort. The second thing is related to measurements in the building. So sometimes the dynamic nature of these technologies is easier to actually capture by measurements of the building. So we have two things, modeling and measurements, that I think will have to go hand in hand in order to supplement the information on the smart readiness and make it more towards data-driven assessment of the building.
Okay,
thank
you, Mikael. I see Alexander nodding, so I'm guessing he wants to add to this or confirm. Alexander.
Actually, mostly confirmed that has covered most of the points I would raise. The only point I would add perhaps to this is the customer-centric, if you want, approach that we would propose, in the sense that often EPCs are issued when the building is empty. And similarly, as Michael said, you can have a smartness indicator showing that building has the systems there, but how will they be used? This is a key. This is a very key element. The building owner or the building user is the one who will finally pay the bills that will come out of this. So the performance of the building counts for them. If we can have all the other information, is like saying we have a car that can go up to 250 kilometers per hour. However, which is the speed in which the car is making optimal use of the fuel that it has. In this sense, this kind of integration of information should be centered around the user. The building itself is smart in the sense that it can do what the user asks it to, but the user should know what they are asking from the building to do. This kind of information entails a lot of responsibility. When you have a motorcycle, or when you have a car, that has new controls like the electric cars, there's different things that you need to learn about them. And I think this element is at the moment missing, and we have to integrate it on the road.
Thank you, Alexander. Let's give the floor to David, and next on is Boris.
Yeah, so I agree with all those comments. What's interesting about the SRI index is that if you look at how it can be constructed, it is potentially suitable to a sort of steady state approach, a kind of one-stop energy assessment. But actually, if you look at some of the areas that it's looking to talk to, these are fundamentally dynamic areas. So the danger there is that the index is okay. It makes sense in terms of how it's constructed, but the users of that index might think it's saying something else. So, personally, I wouldn't be comfortable with any kind of index which is based on a steady state model or based on a series of binary choices that is then used to design grid flexibility or to communicate grid flexibility to an energy network or a district network operator, because it doesn't have that dynamic understanding or it doesn't have that empirical understanding of real energy consumption data. So even though we might, clearly all the projects and all the work behind the SRI has understood all these issues, but that doesn't necessarily mean that user groups will understand all those issues, and it doesn't necessarily mean that future policy makers will understand those issues, because they are actually quite subtle. And just a final point is around, we are highly reliant on steady state modeling in our EPCs, but actually we probably could do better in reflecting all the advancements that have been made around dynamic modeling, the efficiency of dynamic modeling, and also the efficiencies of using big data if we want to use more empirical energy data. I think we could do a lot more around that. There's a big gap between the world of research around building modeling and how that's then applied into sort of EPC land, and I think we need to close that gap a little bit.
Very good points. Thank you, David. Boris, do you have something to add to all of this?
Yeah, I really like the comments from Michael. I think it is very important. We have to go beyond the unification of potential systems that can be monitored or that can be managed. We have to go actually to check how those systems are working, and that is the reason why we have in the time back what we are planning to start with the recommissioning of existing systems. That is the approach that was already applied in Canada and United States. So it means that we have to check, are those systems are performing as they are designed, and are they helping people which are actually using the buildings. In that context, when we will be able to verify the operational conditions of the building, we will be also able to help them to utilize the flexibility potential, and also help them to go further with the projects of, for instance, demand side management and etc. So I think that the issues raised by Michael are really, really okay, and that they will help us in making these things working in practice.
Okay, thank you. Is any other of the panelists or attendees wanting to add something to this? If not, we'll jump to a new question. So it's clear that this route of going to more dynamic simulations and dynamic data capturing is a very interesting route to enhance EPCs and SRIs. Now, also, if for the time being we would stick to the more steady states or the more qualitative methods we have in most of the EPCs, and certainly as well also for the SRI, there's potentially still also some room for improvement. For example, on the topic of the SRI, you work with this catalog of smart services. You could add some additional services. In EPCs, you could reflect also in a steady state model the workings of a smart thermostat, for example, by introducing some saving factors attributed to such a system. So I was wondering if any of your projects is working on integrating such new elements in EPCs or SRIs based on the initial request. I think that Christiana and Maaike might have interest to answer to this, but if others want to join in, please also make sure you can be heard.
Hello once more. Thank you for the question. What we have, it depends on we have many innovative technological solutions that we could think of course, but we will have a static approach, a static methodology as we have now. We should rethink, for example, the possibility of having a database or a central databases, so the manufacturers can have their products there, and we can retrieve all the data we need for the issuance of APCs and SRIs for those who have this combined. But since this is a highly dynamic process in the smart technology industry, for example, we have every time new technologies with new functionalities, so also the functionality levels will be changed, the methodology should change. On my understanding, we have the static methodology now, but we should also enrich it with the new functionalities and also the new technologies were coming on some steady state time. So yes, this is my understanding on that. D3PC now just considers the current methodologies of actually B methodology of the SRI, and of course we are also following the delegated acts, the regulations of the European Commission, and yeah, we'll have to see how this will be developed in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christiana. I think Maarten and Sylvain also want to add into this. So Maarten, you go first.
Yeah, thank you. Well, actually, I would like to set the challenge of the new smart services beyond actually the building boundaries. So I think the perspective of a neighborhood, or if we think about the energy communities, is a very interesting uptake as well. From Extendo side, we're not really working on that aspect, but I think the community level from a neighborhood where you can include smart services, think about smart charging, think about battery neighborhoods or heat storage or even smart district energy systems. I think those are very interested to link as well. And well, maybe it's a future intake of potential or a message towards DGNR as well, is an SRI on neighborhood level. Is that an option to consider as well? Because I think the energy transition, we cannot go building by building on individual scale. We always have to level it up to neighborhood and even energy community scale. Thank you.
Very interesting point indeed. Sylvain?
Yes, thank you, Stein. Yeah, indeed, exactly the same as Martin just said first. We have in our EPC recast, amongst our pilots in EPC recast, one of the first pilot that is being monitored, long-term monitoring, and we benefit from the already in place systems associated with energy production, energy storage, and they also are establishing in Luxembourg an energy community. And accessing all this data real time obviously makes sense and is very useful for piloting the energy community. And the energy provider company is looking at this data to also deploy their next business models associated with that. So indeed, the SRI should reflect at some point this specific aspect. But there was another service I want, or vision towards new services for the SRI I wanted to mention, which are directly related to interacting with the users, with the occupants of those buildings. Of course, this is somehow reflected today in the levels of functionality associated with each of the services covered in the SRI evaluation. But I believe that this interaction with the users requires more and more specific systems, devices, and generally speaking, services that are fitted for the purpose of dealing with occupants of a dwelling or users, employees in an office building, and so on. So this also could be a kind of service to be reflected in the SRI in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sylvain. Is anybody else wishing to add to this? Again, I remind you, if you have questions here in the room or online, put them in the chat. I see we already had one question on how the projects would interact, but it appears to be well answered already by Andre as well in the chat, explaining how this cluster of projects works together. Last point you made, Sylvain, was on the user. Let's take a different look now to the assessor. It was mentioned by some of you before that currently the EPC scheme works mostly with formal trained assessors. Is any of your projects looking into types of self-assessment or other types of EPC assessments, at least for the SRI topic? In the technical support studies, that was one of the ideas that self-assessment could be an option. And actually, there are two ways of self-assessment. There is a user, can be an individual consumer, or could, for example, be a facility manager performing the assessment. You could even take it one step further, and in the end, having your building self-assess itself, the technology alerting when they got updated, and so on. So happy to receive your insights on this. And I think David is interested to go first. Yes, David.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'd say that with EPCs and any metric coming out of EPCs, consistency is probably more important than accuracy. So if an assessor assesses my building, I don't expect them to predict the energy consumption with great accuracy, but I do expect 5 different assessors to come up with very similar results if they're assessing the same building. And one of the reasons why we don't always see that level of consistency, if you look at some independent studies, is the different background and training of assessors. So we have quite a wide, because we have so many buildings to assess, we end up with quite a wide range of assessors. So my concern with this point would be, if you have a mix of self-assessment, formal assessment, informal assessment, trying to generate the same index, then that index loses meaning because it's no longer standardized in the way that it should be. And in terms of the cross-cert project, we are looking at kind of quality control and verification. And if you're proposing new metrics onto EPCs that are generated in different ways, then your ability to try and harmonize and homogenize that index across, actually within a single country, let alone across lots of different countries, becomes very, very difficult and probably impossible. So then I think you lose meaning, you lose kind of meaning and function of that index you've created because it's no longer consistent, it's no longer standardized. So I think I would prefer a consistent, structured approach behind that index.
So you're pleading towards consistency, which also requires proper training and certification, I guess, of the assessors. Okay, let's see.
Alternatively, if you think this is an index that can be generated through a self-assessment approach, and bypass the need for an energy assessor coming to a building, that's fine. But that process itself also needs to be consistent so that it's carried out the same way for every building, potentially every country that's adopting that index.
Well, certainly if the output is a certificate in terms of the SRI, you might make a differentiation between a formal certificate and just something you do online to improve your building without having it eventually on paper, for example. So that could also be a thought.
Right, but there's still an end user using that metric, so that needs to have, it needs to have the same currency, the same meaning for those different user groups. Even if it's not a formal metric, it has to mean something. There has to be some assumptions and understanding behind it, and so you still need consistency, I think, even if it's a relatively informal metric that you're producing.
Let's see if others agree with this point. Maria?
Yes, I think I agree with David's approach regarding this aspect. This is my opinion more than official IPANASEA point of view, no? But for me, professional assessors should conduct the SRI assessment, and these assessors should receive a specific training. I don't know if 1, 2, or 3 days training, depending on their previous knowledge and experience background, maybe. And this allow to ensure that the triage procedure, the selection of services and functionality levels, and so on, are being properly carried out. No, because if not, I have serious doubt about it. Ideally, the training should be complemented with an exam, I think, no, an accreditation. So, for instance, the certified SRI assessor. And in this way, the SRI assessment could be an official certificate, no, with enough quality to support a new package of tailored recommendation based on smart technologies in order to boost cost-effective building renovation. No? For me, it's something difficult with a self-assessment to get until this point. And the certification training should include not only the SRI methodology, I think, no, but also some input categories very related to the SRI service catalog, such as envelope, technical building system, renewable energy sources, and so on. And in my opinion, for both the SRI and the EPC assessment, this basic knowledge on all these themes is needed. No, so some overlapping input parameters are easy to assess, no, while others are technically more complex, maybe, and assessors need to have master knowledge about that, no. But I don't know. I think, some training, some combined training session, no, for EPC and SRI could be developed, no, and in this way we could reduce costs for trainings for these issues. And what is true also is ideally candidates to be certified assessors for SRI or whatever should prove maybe a previous knowledge about technical building systems, including building automation and control systems.
Okay, thank you, Maria. So both you and David seem to be on the same track. Let's see if Andre and the EPCerts project are also thinking around the same way.
Yes, thank you, Stijn. Surprise, surprise. Yes, we are. I start with 2 keywords, which both David and Maria covered, and it's quality and trust. And if I look at the supply side, so if you look at what training material you have for EPC assessors and what would be needed for the SRI, there's, again, like the time needed to add the missing data that you would need as input for the SRI assessment is the same for the training side. So it's, again, the most cost-effective way that we see it in EPCerts, of course. And then if you look, and this would create, of course, the needed quality and trust, which is already an issue with EPCs, which have been already, let's say, improved several times in the past years, and will be, I guess, will continue to evolve. and this will not be an exception for the SRI. And what I wanted to say also for the self-assessment part, though, is that you need, in order to trigger something, as I said in my previous interventions, you need a sort of hook. You need an entry point, and that might be the only. And this is more me as a building professional speaking, rather than user project. A self-assessment, as long as it's differentiated from the certificate, the SRI official assessment, could actually ensure an entry point, or at least an overview of the building stock, because that's what's missing now. Even with EPCs, we don't know where the pain points are. We have a sample of the building stock, but we don't see all of it. And even that sample, of course, you have different methodologies. You don't have all the energy use services, etc., etc. So that's where the self-assessment, I think, could make a difference for the SRI, as it's a overall enabler for many other things.
Okay, thank you. So that's still an opening to, apart from the more formal training and certified part, there could be some other options. Is anybody else wanting to comment on this, or disagreeing with the former panelists? Since nobody is reacting.
Stein, just one more point for the automated one. I think that would be the most in handy to help the assessor, to have something automatic that you just need to double check. And I copied a link earlier in the chat, technical monitoring and commissioning. There were previous projects, and there is actually a guidebook available on that. And there are tools, so technically it's already feasible. There are tools that check that settings in the building automation system actually are operating as they were designed for. So that could easily be used, such tools for the SRI automated first step. Of course, you would always need a human to complement.
Okay, thank you for this addition, Andrei. Let's now take a step by looking at the immediate future. As you know, as was introduced multiple times earlier this morning, we're in a testing and implementation phase of the SRI across Europe. And here with introduction of the 11 projects, some of you also mentioned that you're working on local pilots. I was wondering whether any of your projects is working together with the national authorities, so whether your tests are part of the national testing and or implementation phase, or whether it's standalone. I believe that Maarten has something to say on this, and Andrei as well, but I heard of more of your projects, so please jump into this discussion. Yes, Maarten.
Yes. No, as mentioned under Extendo, it was really the aim to have like 10 potential features to link to the EPC, and we gave the freedom to several public authorities across Europe, and I think we have around 10 that are now involved of those public authorities to test several of these indicators. And as mentioned, the SRI indicator is being tested by 4 of them, but then the other indicators are tested by more. And what we do see there is that maybe the main request is to have the testing phase already as user-friendly as possible, because if you develop kind of a data Excel sheet to fill in and to do a kind of a first assessment, and if it's not user-friendly, your assessors basically will have almost like a negative perception of the indicator that you're developing. That's maybe also a message sent to the SRI 4 phase that you're in implementing in different countries, is that even your testing data equipment or testing data sheets have to be extremely user-friendly. For example, one of the questions that we had is like, if you test 2 or 3 several different indicators, do you have like one introduction data entrance sheet where then the assessors can plug it in, or do they have to repeat the same work and copy paste? That's one. Or second, some data indicators or some data aspects have a different naming in different member states. So be very cautious on how you ask the information. For example, indoor floor surface? Is it including or excluding outdoor walls? So this kind of elements, there's some slight variation between different member states that has to be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Martin. I'll be wearing my hat of the SRI support contract for a few seconds now and saying that we certainly know that the current Excel sheet is far from perfect, but of course we have limitations here. We are not tasked with developing a full-fledged proper software tool with a very nice visual interface, but still, if you have specific requests, see room for improvement, please alert that to the study team and we can see what we could potentially do to improve. Andre, did you want to comment on the national testing phases and the involvement of the projects?
Yes, I'll really not steal a lot of time. So just to say that we have 11 countries covered in EPCerts and roughly 15 buildings, both residential and non-residential. And we don't have any formal connection to the official public national testing that will happen in the coming months. And we've heard from some of the member states earlier today. However, we would welcome that to leverage these pilot buildings because we are anyhow doing that. And furthermore, as I outlined, we will prepare a web-based interface for the latest methodology, of course, for research purposes and for the purpose of EPCert project. But that can also be leveraged if as wanted. But we would, yeah, let's say the door is wide open. We are here to collaborate and yeah, build forward together, as I said in the beginning.
Okay, great to hear. I just want to comment that we had already 3 member states presenting some of the plans. I can not share with you which other member states are currently working on this. I'm sorry for that, but I'm not allowed to do so. But know that there are multiple others, and probably the SRI platform could be, when established in December, could be a good opportunity for your projects also to reach out to the national authorities. It could improve the outreach of your projects, probably. So, open invitation to keep following up on that. Okay, any further thoughts or comments on this question? If not, we can move to the next. And I think we actually have a question here live from the audience.
I would like to understand, based on the test that you've been running, what is the feedback from the building owners, the building manager, the facility managers that you're working with? Because I'm talking about the EPC, talking about the building logbook, the general feeling is that that's a burden. EPC is done because I had to do it. Is this seen as an advantage already, or is this seen as a new exercise that they will need to apply one day?
Okay, thanks a lot for that question. I think I have to repeat it so the online audience can hear it, but the question here is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I hope I translate it or I repeat it well. Question is, too often right now EPCs, digital logbooks, etc. are seen as a burden, additional work. Is that different for the SRI? Is that by the users, the occupants, the facility managers, etc., really seen as an additional benefit? Are they keen on working with it? Yeah, that's a question. All right. So let's see if there are any experiences with that from the panelists. Yeah, it could be too early, but I know that some of the projects were already involved in the phase. So, Alexander, I think you were first.
Yes, digital building logbooks were mentioned. I would connect them with the building renovation roadmaps. I think that all of these tools make sense when one wants to do something with their building. People will want to do things with their building when they see that they are perhaps consuming too much electricity or too much for heating. at those points, and those are what we would call trigger points, which often have nothing to do actually with energy. They might have to do with a family moving in, or a family growing, or children moving out. These trigger points is when building owners consider that they need to do something with their building, and at that point they need some tools. They can start renovating without planning, but that is a very bad idea. The Building Renovation Roadmap, the Building Renovation Passport support a staged renovation where you can actually know what you will be doing in a few years from now, and avoid lock-ins, avoid taking decisions now that you will regret later because you will not have exploited the full potential of your building. When we see energy performance certificates as a burden, it is usually because we are in a static situation, or it is because the EPCs give us recommendations which are not very useful. EPCs were not made to have recommendations, where they were made to have a static plan, a snapshot of what the building is now. And as I said earlier, it's as an empty building most times. So in this respect, there is a lot of potential in those recommendations when you actually want to do something. And when you're going to spend, let's say, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 euros in renovating your home, then spending a few hundred euros in getting a passport that will give you very good recommendations for your needs is a very good investment. And this is how we should see it. I believe that the same goes for a real good EPC, because we can already get EPCs in around 50 euros in many European countries, but that doesn't mean that they are really useful. They're usually just papers that we need for some formality. So you can get a good EPC by investing, you can get a building renovation passport by investing, and you can get a sustainable smart readiness indicator certificate by putting some money of it, as long as you have reasons to use it. But when you have invested in such systems, I believe that there will be a reason to invest also in the certification.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you for the question as well. It sparked a lot of interest of the panelists, as you can see. So, but we're running out of time, so I want to have all of you to have the floor, but be very short. And still, perhaps also invitation to some of the people we didn't hear too much today. I think that's Mike and Peter. If you want to jump into the discussion, please feel free. But let's now first hear Boris.
Thank you very much. This is really interesting question. One of the parts of our one of the key messages that happened during the preparation of the TIME project was the utilization of the Smart Readiness Indicator in the context of
Boris, this is not working. We cannot hear you. Let's shift to another person and see if it works. We'll come back to you. We see Mike is with us. Ladies first.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I totally agree with Alexander. It's always what you want to do with the certificate. As we see with EPCs, as Alexander has told, in many countries, EPCs are a burden, and hopefully SRIs will not be. So it's important to design that it is useful for the user, and make it available at not so high costs, and have high quality. So everything comes together to have a high quality certificate that is useful. And that's an approach for the politicians, for the national regulations, to make a framework, the framing conditions for that. Yeah. So, and our projects, of course, are there for making the recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's try Boris again, perhaps without video. Maybe it's just.
I tried to turn off my camera. Can you hear me now? I turned off my camera and I hope this will work.
Really sorry, Boris, but this is not working. Can you type your answer in the chat, because we do want to hear your opinion, but if we'll read it then instead of hearing, if that's okay with you. Let's go to the two last answers here. Mikael?
Yes, I just very quickly want to tell that, share my probably personal opinion that we have to be very careful when moving from voluntary to compulsory schemes here. So as long this is a voluntary, it is in fact the building owner who decides if he's going into the travel of renovation roadmaps, logbooks, more, let's say, detailed dynamic EPCs. So answering this first question, or addressing this first issue, if it's the building owner wish to use this service, probably clear some air here, because as soon we move to the compulsory schemes, well, yes, we have a situation where we can say that we put an additional burden on the building owner. So I would just say that we have to be careful when moving from one scheme to another.
Fair point. Thank you, Michael. And to finish, let's have Martin, very short, because we're running out of time.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will say something controversial. I hope in a sense that it becomes a little bit a burden, but then for those that actually do not invest in energy renovation measures or in smart aspects, just very quick on, we didn't speak about COVID today yet, but a building owner or a property owner that has large office buildings with very proper and decent indoor environment and good ventilation, he has to be able to show it some way or another. So I really insist on having this transition of the mindset where it really gets an added value, that you can prove the value of your building and the investments that you did. So I think it's both a burden for those that did not, and actually an advantage for those that actually did the investments. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I see Peter and Andre also joined. Can you be very brief, or? Yeah, Peter.
Yes. Yeah, one aspect maybe to raise here, and our project is addressing this, that probably not even the single building owners or flat owners needs to be targeted with these indicators, but probably the funding agency or who decides who gives energy services for a lot of people, because they understand the data coming from these indicators and all the monitoring tools, and they can actually translate the numbers into something useful information for the building users, and maybe this is also an aspect for future use of the different indicators that are developed.
Okay, thanks a lot, Andre. I'll skip you, but you have the final word, so you can squeeze in some answer if you want. From my side, I want to thank all panelists and the whole audience. It was a packed agenda, but also packed with a lot of good ideas, good suggestions. It seems to me that the projects are all well aligned. In some sense, you could be considered as competitors, but it feels differently. It feels like we're all heading in the same direction and wanting to share experience and enrich each other. So that's really great to hear. Also, from my perspective, the SRI support team working for Commission, we're really happy to hear all of this, and of course want to remind you that we're very open. Our primary target is working together. It's working for the member states, but we're also open to exchange with research projects, and the other project really dedicated to doing that is SmartBuild for EU. So if you're not a member yet of that Smart Building Innovation Community, please sign up. And if possible, also collaborate on the joint white papers that we've had the first series working together with multiple projects, and we'll be launching the next series actually this afternoon, but also later on you can still join in. So would be very welcome to do so. So thanks again to all speakers, and I'll leave the final words to the host of today, André.
Thank you, Stijn. If you could please go to the very last slide of the slide deck. Excellent. Thank you very much. So exactly as Stijn said, I'm amazed how, let's say, in sync we are. Although there are 11 projects, of course we complement each other, but we have a lot of similar visions, I would say, for the next steps. So thank you in all the languages. I really encourage all of us to continue going far together, and hopefully we can be an inspiration for the wider community. On a more technical level, I would say let's learn from all the lessons of energy performance certification assessment for buildings in the past 10 years. And let's apply that to all the other instruments like building renovation roadmaps, digital building logbooks, SRI, because they come together, and let's make them meaningful for actual building operations so that people can actually relate and see the added value, because indeed it should show all the investment made in the buildings and their higher, I would say, value that they bring, and all the additional benefits in addition to energy, of course. A big thank you to everybody, and yeah, let's continue the collaboration. Stijn, special thanks. I don't know what we would have done if you wouldn't have been there physically.
You're welcome. I was happy to participate. Was a nice session.
Yeah, well, actually, for me, it was the first hybrid event, and I guess that showed a lot. But fortunately, we managed in the end to somehow have a smoother second part, at least, of the workshop. And if we are to organize an event in Hopin again, I think it will go really, really well.
Well, I'll hope you'll be meeting live next time, André.
Definitely. I think it's in all of our dreams to meet up at a certain moment after all these events, also in person, finally. Well, have a nice continuation there in Rome. Make the most of your stay, all the people in the room, and also you, Stijn, of course, and also the people online that plan to join additional sessions in sustainable places this year. I think they all are very promising, like our session this morning.
All right. Thanks a lot. Well, enjoy Brussels, I guess, but I can tell you weather is better over here, so that's a first. Anyway, thanks a lot. Talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.